welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Paperback Flicks. I'm Ruth Craddock,
I'm Rae Davidson.
and today we're talking about the book slash movie Uglies. Um, the book is by Scott Westerfeld. Again, my sister told me about it some years ago, and I never got around to reading it. And then Netflix finally released their movie version of it, which I guess like they had in production for like a few years, and then they finally released it just barely in September. So I was like, oh yeah, let's do that. They enjoyed the movie, and I was like, well, okay, let's do it that way where I watch the movie first, then read the book, and then I watch the movie again. So, have you read this before?
No, I had never heard of it before.
Okay. So, your thoughts on the book?
So it came out early 2000s-ish, like right as all of the dystopian young adult books came out.
During that huge like dystopian boom.
Yeah, and I've kind of felt like they've all been super derivative of each other. It's always a teenage girl in some kind of weird, like, what we recognize as a super controlled, not right society, and then she has to like rebel and change the world, break the mold or whatever. Like every
Mm-hmm.
single one of them, The Host, Divergent, this one, kind of even Hunger Games. Like I don't even remember all of them. I just remember being like, oh yeah, that's exactly like movie X or book X.
Yeah.
However, what made it different as I went along, well, I was listening to the book. Like, yes, the setup is similar, but what do you do with it? How does she change things, or is she successful? You know what I mean? Like, and so once I got past the setup that is the same as all of the setups,
Mm-hmm.
and the book got into its own story, then it got interesting to me.
Okay.
Also, the concept was super creepy, which I kind of love.
I kind of felt the same way when I was watching the movie before I read the book. I was like, dystopians are incredibly formulaic. They're they're not surprising. If you want a mystery, if you want to be surprised, don't read dystopians because they're exactly the same. And if you like things exactly the same, where the story plots and the story beats are like bam, 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 then by all means, read yourself dystopian. It's the concept of the world is what people are reading it for. It's
Hmm.
like the characters and how did the world become this way, and why did they rebuild it in this form, and what was their logic behind this particular ideal of a perfect society, and like how were they improving it from what we had. And that's what people are coming for. They're not coming for surprises, really. They're not coming for a unique plot line or even unique characters, per se. Because, like, even though I will say that I think, like, all the characters I've read in these things, they have kind of their own personality. They're very similar. And, like, they could be sort of interchangeable. You could probably put Tally into Hunger Games. You know what I mean? Like, you could
Yeah.
pop all these people into other books and they would probably respond the same way as the character in that book did, but
Correct. Yeah.
slightly different, just a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And of course, there's always the two love interests, which in this one is a little different because the first guy, Paris, is like a friend.
Yeah.
And they implied more in the movie that there could be more and that he kind of felt that way about her, but was waiting until they were both pretty to see if that was a thing.
Yeah.
But in the book, they don't apply it as much.
Yeah. I didn't get that out of the book. I liked that the triangle was the love triangle that always is part of this too.
Mm-hmm.
But it was her stepping into Shay's, you know what I mean?
Most
Like,
romance, yeah.
yeah, I saw Shay was clearly into David, even if David was
He
lukewarm on Shay.
decided if he liked her that way or not. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
And
they
then
have David. David's the other love interest.
Yeah.
Again, they're always polar opposites of each other somehow. These love interests, which I have said in other times we talk about dystopians, how that doesn't make sense to me. How two completely different guys, like the same girl, when they're completely different types of guys, it seems they'd have the different types of girl, right? And then same thing, like, why does this girl like two completely different types of guys? Like, what is the actual thing that draws her to them? And I don't know. I like, I generally only liked one guy at a time. I wasn't usually eyeing multiple men. Like, if I was into somebody other than that person, I've had multiple people like me at the same time and wondered why. But like, most of the time I was like, I'm not even nice to you. Why do you like me?
Yeah,
Anyways,
so I have no, like, I am totally the girl that would read these kind of things and then be like, why is it always that everyone likes the main girl? Because I'm the main character of my own story, right?
I'm like, well,
I
where are
might
my
have,
army of boys all obsessing over me?
yeah, I don't
Where's
have
the
guys just
guys?
being like, I see her inner beauty. Like every time I would read these things, I was like, if I was that girl, I don't see what others would see in me. Even if like you see like Hunger Games and you see the appeal of the like strong independent girl who still cares about people and you see the Triss in Divergent, see that she's just struggling to maintain and she doesn't, at first she's like, oh my gosh, why am I even thinking about romantic stuff? I want to survive, like.
Yeah,
And so, like, I kind of get that. In this case, I'm like, she's just a normal girl. What's her name? Tally? I'm
Callie.
like, I can actually kind of identify with Tally. I convinced myself that I was ugly, whether or not it was true. Like,
Mm-hmm.
pubescent me, like, I felt like they even mentioned that in the book where she's like, maybe it's just that time of life. Like, gee, imagine going from a cute little kid to what you will be as an adult. There's like an awkward phase in there.
Yeah,
And
that
like,
has to be normal. It's called puberty.
yeah, yeah. And she
So
does mention that. She's like, maybe that would just happen regardless. And that doesn't mean that we're all ugly on the other side of it. Huh. You know?
yeah.
But, but yeah, I, junior high me, even high school me, like I was like, well, sure, I'm not the pretty girl. I'm not the girl that guys like. And I kind of shut myself down,
Yeah.
which is exactly what they talk about in the book.
Mm-hmm.
That, that like they give each other these awful names or
Yeah,
themselves,
these nicknames are like she's Squint and he's Nose and she's
Yeah,
Kitty and like their whole little culture at the dorms, like the ugly dorms, is like all about putting each other down and like it's all about brainwashing them too that everything that they're doing, this is all for your good and this is why.
yeah,
And it's an indoctrination of their ideals to get you to follow um, the rules and to do what they say. And I found that interesting in a sense because of all the indoctrination in schools. There has been more recently trying to push one ideology over another ideology, trying to push um, identity politics into school while we're not supposed to have religion in school. Not sure
yeah,
why one is okay and the other isn't, but either
yeah,
way, it's like it's not your job as a teacher. It's not your job at school or the state to tell the kids who they are, what to think, what to believe, and
yeah,
it's your job is to teach them the basics and how to be a decent human being in a sort of community setting. But it's not your job to define their sexuality or their spirituality. It's an entirely personal slash family thing that's
yeah.
supposed to happen with your family. And that's the other thing that's interesting about this one is that like it seems like the kids grow up with their parents up until like
Hmm.
11, 12. So it's kind of like sending your kid off to boarding school.
Right.
So like they grow up with their parents like in like almost like a regular kind of situation, but their parents are all beautiful and all pretty. And then they grow up knowing that someday they'll be pretty like them too, but they won't be for a long time. And they just accept that they won't be until they get the procedure. And then they go off like at 11 or 12, kind of like Harry Potter. You go off to wizard school at that age. But instead of wizard school, it's a place where they make you feel horrible about yourself. And so you're separated from family and you're just with all the other kids that have been told that they're ugly and awful. And you get told on a regular basis you're ugly and awful.
Mhm.
And they give you like this little device. It's like, here, this is how you can fix yourself to look better. Here's all the different ways that you're wrong, in which you would be perfect if you had and this.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting that they're kind of had normal childhood. And then they go into this. And they're indoctrinated with all this crazy stuff they're taught so that they'll believe it. And of course they'll be like, well, I've been learning for the last 5, 6 years, whatever. That every day has been about this. My life has been in the storm. I haven't gone home to family. That's the feeling I get. I don't get that. Oh no, I guess I do go home for like the summer.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so like they do see their family, but it's for only a couple months at a time or for a couple weeks. It's not like they're going to school and then coming home and then, oh, my teacher said this today, and the parent being like, really? No, but not that it matters. The parents are all already brainwashed anyways.
Right.
So yeah, so I
Yeah,
thought that was
so
interesting. And then you have the whole dorm situation, and it's just the whole thing. It's just very like a bubble. They keep them in this bubble. They're not even supposed to go over to the other towns. Not supposed to really go anywhere. And I did like the whole like futuristic concept that everything's a smart something. There's a smart bridge. There's a smart wall, smart ring, everything. So it's like you couldn't really sneak around unless you were smart enough to figure out how to fool the system. That's
right.
one of the things I liked about Tally and her friend was that they were able to sort of like mess with things and find ways around the system. And they're able to find their own way into the pretty city with like an old fashioned bridge or whatever. And I like
Yeah.
that because that shows that they're clever and that they're having ingenuity. And plus, that's the kind of thing I think people would do if they were in that tight of bubble. You'd be like, I got to find some way to not go insane in here. What do I do?
So it that concept, the tricks, how they all the uglies always did all these little tricks. There comes a point, I think towards the end of the book, where Tally is kind of like realizing the reality of her situation that she had been in. Because for most of the book, she wants to be pretty. I think that that's why I identified with her, because I am the person that would take the blue pill. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I am the person that kind of just wants to be pretty. Like myself now, no. Like now that I see, I'm like,
You were pretty
hard
old.
no. But but do you know what I mean? Like 15-year-old me would have wanted to be pretty like her. Like if I got in that situation, if I was just like, I'm doing tricks and I'm so rebellious, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But who cares? Because in the end, I get to be pretty. I can have my fun and I can go keep having fun, right? I would be her. And then to be like, are you kidding? That's literally the only thing that I have ever wanted is to be pretty. And now you're not letting me. That might be the only thing that gets me to the smoke as well. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It's interesting to think that your entire life is based off of one idea and then suddenly have it ripped away from you. And I think that's interesting. This how manipulative that is. Yeah, in the book and the movie, they showed her sit there for a long
Mhm.
time before they finally sent someone from special circumstances to like bring her and be like, oh, by the way, you're not getting your procedure today. You're not going to be pretty
Right.
after all. And they're like, oh, yeah, it'll be fine. You'll be pretty once you betray your friend and you tell us everything you know about where she went. In the movie, they made it seem like the Smoke and David and all those guys were a threat
Mhm.
to the Prettyville. This is what I'm going to call it. I can't remember really.
Yeah, it was just Pretty Town, I think.
They have a name, the town, the
Yeah,
city.
yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to think of it as Prettyville.
So Tally, like, when she realizes the reality that she had been living all this time and she realizes what she wanted was to be pretty, and she's like, all those tricks that I thought I was so clever, we got away with so many tricks and all uglies, like it's like a rite of passage that we're gonna sneak around and do. And she's like, oh my gosh, they knew we were doing this stuff. They let us get away with this stuff so that we could feel so rebellious, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think of like when so my kids are older now, but when they were little, and I would be like I'd make cookies and I'd be like, no cookies until we finish dinner. It's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I would see my 4-year-old like sneaking up and being like, sneak a cookie. And I would be like, are you sneaking a cookie? And they're like, with big cookie in their mouth, you know? And we let it go and we kind of wink and giggle and because of course they can have a cookie, you know? But that's just it. Of course they can have a cookie. I was setting the precedent that they can't just eat as many cookies as they want. You
Yeah.
know, no cookies. And then if you sneak one, you
Yeah.
know, and and
People go
that's
anyway and they feel like they got away with something, like it's a bigger deal than it is.
right. You're special. You got a cookie, you know. And she's like, that's exactly what they were doing. They knew we were doing these tricks. They were like, don't you break the rules. And then when we break the rules, we're like, we're so rebellious. And it keeps you in the box.
Within the
Yep, look, yeah, look at you. You're such a rule breaker. You're such a rogue. Okay,
hmm
come get your surgery, honey. You
Yeah.
know,
Until you go out into the real world and then you realize how privileged and how like sheltered you were and how silly all that stuff was. And then
yeah,
eventually she uses all those skills that she took for granted as just tricks, to help her in her actual quest. I don't know. I think it's interesting that the technology in this world, the concepts are interesting. At first, I thought it was just a really silly notion, though, that somehow being pretty equalized everything. Like, oh, that's the problem. The real problem isn't, hunger or different ideologies or anything like that. It's because we're not beautiful. And like when I first heard about this, I was like, that's really stupid. That's really stupid. Why would anybody? Because here's the thing: we all know that ideals about beauty are completely different, unless like they mean people out of their own insecurities about themselves. If they think they're beautiful, then they treat everybody else better because they think they're beautiful, or is it because everybody's beautiful, then everybody treats each other better, or because you feel beautiful, everybody else feels beautiful? Like, what's
right.
the
Well,
the actual thought
I
there?
kind of I kind of liked the brief explanation that she gave in class. They would have their genetics lessons and they were talking about, larger eyes make you seem more trustworthy and, fuller lifted cheekbones make you whatever. Like
Yeah, they had
the
the whole like
reason,
logic, and the
yeah,
symmetry
because
means having, good genes or being
yeah,
healthy. And
because
yeah,
we do say that, like having birthing hips, oh, look at her nice round hips. She's got good birthing hips. And so that always has been kind of a concept. There are biological triggers for people,
hmm
and there are cultural triggers for people. Something that's beautiful. In Japan, in ancient Japan, it was beautiful for a woman to be fat. If she was fat, she was beautiful because it meant she was well fed, she wasn't poor, she wasn't sickly.
hmm
But we know
Okay.
plenty of poor people who also are fat. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and so, but that was a sign of beauty because of what it meant to their society. And
Yeah.
so but I liked that they were like, well, genetics tells us that you should look like this for these reasons. And
hmm
also, like, if you had too dark of a skin, they would lighten it. If you had too pale of a skin, they would deepen it to try to bring you
Equalizing everybody, they're sort of the same as
right.
as they can.
And they had like pretty committees that went to these intercity councils or whatever.
Mhm.
And so like people chose like generation to generation, the surgeons are choosing the standards of beauty and saying it's genetics. Like, and then at one point in the book, she's like, "Oh my gosh, David, you look so much like your father. It's so weird. You guys even have like the same shape of nose." And he's like, "Yeah, that's actual genetics." Like,
Oh. You're supposed to look like your parents. You're supposed to look like they were put in a blender and you popped out. I don't know so much they were trying to say that it like was genetic to look completely different than everybody else, but that like at the same time, you're right. They were defining the rules of beauty, like what the standards were. It wasn't so much each person is defining that. And I guess you kind of are because they're still like doing their own little morphos, like what they're like. I guess she had like a couple hundred different versions of
Yeah.
herself that she had made in her little tablet thing of
Yeah.
different versions of herself of what she would look like. I did like the thing where they talked about in the book that like when she's trying to make one for Shay, like the morpho, she like it automatically like split your face in half and made a symmetrical version of both sides.
Hmm.
So it was like two different people, but they're both you. Because almost nobody has a perfectly symmetrical face. So our face is going to be slightly different depending on your side. And that's why people are like, well, what's your good side?
Yeah.
There tends to be one side that we think looks a little better than the other side,
Yep.
based off of our personal opinion.
Yep. That's even down to when you part your hair on a side, you choose based upon which side you think is more aesthetic. You know what I mean?
Or like how your hair likes to sit. Like
Yeah.
a kid who doesn't have a part. It doesn't believe in parting. It just wants to be in his face. And like we try, like the best it parts though is the opposite of the rest of us. So like if we do get it to part, it'll part better over there, but it still kind of wants to just like get all up in there.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
so
like
yeah.
you can see even with makeup. So I do tend to put on kind of heavy eye makeup when I put on makeup to try to even them out. So when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I had Bell's palsy, and so temporarily this whole side of my face, like it didn't go completely dead, but it was not a real stroke, but there was a stroke-like incident. I forget what they call it, but it caused Bell's palsy, so just half of my face just like didn't work for a little while,
Oh
and then
wow.
it would slowly like come back and back. But like even with makeup, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but like this eye is more slanted down, whereas this eye is more of that like traditional almond shape.
Slightly, but only because
I
you pointed it out. If you hadn't pointed it out,
Yeah,
I wouldn't even notice.
well, right.
Yeah.
And it's a little more dramatic when I'm not wearing makeup because I do try to even it out a little with the makeup. But like when I smile and like just my natural smile will pull more on this side and this side I have to really like I have to kind of to get this side
Push
to
my face up because my mouth wants to like go down.
yeah.
Actually, just go down. So like anytime I do like a big smile, I feel like I'm forcing it to try to get like the corners of my lips to go up. So, anyways,
Yeah. And that's something that Shay points out that she's like, I like that. I don't want to be symmetrical. I
mm,
like that, I wink a little more with this side or whatever. I don't know what she says, but
yeah,
she likes the asymmetry because it makes her unique.
exactly.
And there are times that I feel each way. There are times that I just wish that one eye could look like the other freaking eye so it didn't take me an hour and a half to put on makeup. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
doesn't, but you know what I mean. But and then there are other times that I'm like, I kind of like that when I smile, it almost looks like I'm winking at you. Like we're almost sharing a little moment. We're not, but I like,
you
it's
are.
like a
We're
special
always
thing.
sharing a moment. Yeah, there's a lot of things that like a lot of our insecurities. I wonder if they really come from our own insecurities or if they come from again this notion of what pretty is, this
Hmm.
whole standard of pretty. Because and that's kind of like the whole thing with like movie stars and magazines, fashion models. It's sort of similar to what they're doing. They're trying to say the fashion industry has decided
Yep.
what is
Well,
beautiful.
my eyebrows are a perfect example of this. So like when we were junior high and I did nothing with my eyebrows, they were crazy. They were almost unibrow. I didn't actually have any hair in the middle, but they were so thick. My dad would call me Groucho Marx,
Oh gosh.
like they were so thick, and I was always like, I remember you had at least a brother or two, probably all of them, that would tease me about it. And
they'd ask me, "So how's Ray? Did she finally pluck her eyebrows?" And I'm like, "What are you? What
Yeah.
do you always think of?"
And then when I was 15, my dad got a job at a cosmetology college. They did cosmetology and estiology, skincare, as well as
I didn't realize
hair.
that's how you got into that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
He was a financial aid director there. And so I was there all the time. And at the time, this is the late 90s, early 2000s.
Hmm.
The thing was the like single hair almost going across, like
Really thin
they
eyebrows.
would they would wax, they would tweeze. That I had the super thin, and then you always like drew over it with the black so that it was really pronounced but
Hmm.
super thin, right?
Yeah.
And that was what we did all through high school.
Mhm.
And when I got married, and I'm like, I cannot keep this up. And my husband was like, that's okay. I don't care. And so we have pictures of me with baby Bethany, my oldest, that I was talking about. And the eyebrows had grown back, but not the same. Like
Mhm.
they
Yeah,
had that
you pluck
really
them
dark
back on.
line and then like weird scattered stuff, and it was
Yeah.
bad. And so now, like what I have now, it's no longer the in look. The look now is that thicker,
The
fuller,
thicker eyebrow.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah,
think that's funny. I've always had really thin eyebrows and they've always kind of been naturally arched. I'd like have to pluck some. The most part of my eyebrows are what most people back in our day wanted to have. Except
right.
for I I went to a point where I made plucked them a little too much and I went too far back. So then I looked and I was always surprised. And then when I stopped doing that, realizing I wasn't really helping myself, like, yeah, they grew back, but they're lighter and thinner than they used to be. So like
Yeah.
my eyebrows would actually be thicker here. So now I have to color that part in to even have any eyebrows there because it's all
Yeah.
just white hairs instead of brown hairs now.
Yeah. So
So
I don't do a lot of brow makeup or anything. And I'll still like tweeze this stuff, but whatever. But like the standard of beauty now is essentially what I had when I was 12 and hated it so much.
it changes. Like it used to be that like you were saying, being full figured meant you were well fed and well off, whatever. And then like one of the things is they say is that they switched to the skinnier thin models because then people were paying attention to the clothes more and less to the figure of the person. And that's why
Hmm.
we have the skinny heroin chic looking models. It was supposed to be about the clothes, not about the person actually wearing them. But if
Oh.
that's the case, why do you care what their faces look like? Like anybody could be a fashion model if that's the case. But anyways, but yeah, so like the standards of beauty change. Like,
Right.
again, like having tanner skin now means like, you're athletic, you get out, you're healthy, and you do things out in nature. Whereas like medieval times, it meant you were a laborer and you were a poor person
Yeah. Well,
because the wealthy, they stayed inside. So that's what they
right.
talk about having fair skin and being a beautiful thing. That wasn't so much like a racist thing. It was your skin wasn't tan or
Right.
leathery because you weren't outside.
Even in Pride and Prejudice, when they talk about how Elizabeth has been outside so much lately while she's been touring around, her skin is so brown. And you're
Yeah,
like, her skin was not brown. I mean, I don't care who she is. If she was Elizabeth Bennet living in Victorian England or whatever, like, her skin was not brown.
but now that's
Yeah.
okay. Like you want to look tan. Now it's like, oh, you're so pasty. Get outside. Go somewhere. Like honestly, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I will look this way no matter how much I try to tan. Some
Yep.
people cannot tan. Yeah, some of us are just naturally pasty. We go from white to red. It's either burn or we're white. And I get
And
some,
freckles.
but not much. And I even
Oh,
have Arab blood in me, and I still don't. Like a tiny bit of Arab blood's true, but I don't tan. So, anyways,
it does speak to like that's why this concept was so gripping for me because
mhm.
I don't live in a society that forces kids to go fight to the death. And I don't live in a society that I don't know, is being taken over by aliens. But I do live in a society that judges you based on what you look like. And and anecdotally, my experience has been very different from what people assume that my experience will be. Like,
Hmm.
honestly, on camera right now, I think that I look like a pretty decent looking lady. Like I
Well, especially you've got makeup and I've got none, and I appreciate
right.
that.
And I frankly I have looked better in my 40s than I did in my teens and 20s. Like, you
So,
know,
really, it's not always like being a teenager is the prime of your life. Everybody's kind of different.
I have four blonde children. So funny. I married a 6'2" blonde tan guy. And apparently that means that I'm going to have a bunch of tall blonde babies because that's what they all turned into.
Yeah.
So, but my so we live in Arizona right now, and my oldest daughter, well, blonde about like your color of blonde right now, that blonde naturally, and super light skin, even though she tans very easily, just super light skin naturally. Bright blue eyes. She looks like a radiant half the time because her eyes were so blue. And then she went to school at uh a charter school over here because she was too young to start at the public school. She was testing high enough, but they didn't have a spot for her. And so they referred us to a charter school. So we go to this charter school, and she was one of about half a dozen Caucasian children. A lot of them were from the reservation, or they had Latino or similar
Backgrounds.
ethnicity. Like that is what is very prevalent around here, but especially around where we were at the time.
Okay.
And she was the only blonde and the only blue-eyed child, and clearly like several tones lighter than even the other Caucasian kids. I genuinely didn't think anything about it. We came from Utah Valley.
Everybody's white there. I mean,
I
there's
didn't I
like
didn't think about it.
Hispanics, but like it's predominantly white, or at least
Right.
in our time.
Yeah, it was counting blonde heads was not a thing that I could do. It's a thing I
No,
do now.
because half of them were blonde, so nobody even blue eyes were like half the people were blue eyed. So I was like,
Yeah, and so but she got ridiculously teased because in her experience, and there was a lot of the African American kids and a lot of the Native American kids and a lot of Hispanic kids or whatever. But there was not a lot of what she looked like. She got teased all the time. She got physically assaulted. We had to take her out of the school. There was a girl whose name was something like Angel or Angelica or something like that, which was the worst name she could have ever had. She relentlessly went after my kid, telling her that she was made wrong. She's like, look at your nasty hair and the fact that, like, if there's a God, he hated you. He didn't even give you any color. You were totally made wrong. Like, to
what
my second grade child. Like, I was like, are you kidding me?
are you
But
kidding?
like, everybody right now, I understand. It is the thing right now that everybody is really focused on skin color. And for our experience, it was exactly the opposite of what we seem to be told every day. Like, she would watch TV and she was told on TV
That she was,
that the black kids had it so hard and she lived a life of privilege in
yeah,
our tiny apartment that we didn't fit in with.
yeah,
And then she would go to school and be told by the Hispanic girls that she was made wrong, like all based on how she looked. That's the society that we live in. And
yeah,
so I think that's why this book resonated with me and why Tally resonated with me. She's the first heroine of any of these dystopian things. And I kind of like the genre, but I've never really identified with them
yeah,
the way I identified here because we do live in a soft version of that society
yeah.
that I can see being Tally, you know? She's the first one that kind of thought the way I thought. She's the first one that kind of saw the situation that she was living in the way I see our situation, you know?
Hmm.
And I wasn't reading this at 15. I was reading it at 40 something. And so
Yeah.
I have that perspective now
Hmm.
where I would not make those decisions now, but 15-year-old me, 100% like tally resonated with me.
Yeah.
So,
I can totally see what you're saying. Like I agree. This does make more sense in the sense that, yeah, I don't think we'll ever live in a world like this, but beauty standards are a thing, and they're always going to be a thing. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be representation and that people shouldn't be able to see themselves in characters, but why does the character that you relate with have to be the same color as you? Why do
yeah.
they have to have the same hair color as you? I've related to brunette characters before. I've related to black characters before. I've related to male characters before. Like, why are we telling everybody that you can only like or appreciate people that are exactly like you? Why are we telling people to only care about the color of their skin,
Yeah.
to only care about their gender or their sexuality or their religion? Like, I relate to people that aren't LDS, the people that aren't Christian, just fine. There's plenty of characters that I have related to that are nothing like me, but I relate to them on a different level about different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why are we being so weird about it? The point,
Well,
the whole thing, making such a big deal about including everybody is also excluding everybody and separating everybody into little boxes instead of just being, we're all human beings and we
right.
all have more in common with each other than you realize.
So, do you know what that makes me think of? The Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella, which is possibly my favorite Cinderella
I
ever.
do like that movie, yes.
But it turns out if Victor, is it Victor, not Victor Hugo, what's his name? That king, the White King, and Whoopi Goldberg have a baby, he's apparently like Asian, Polynesian. But you know what? But I don't even care because I love that movie and I think it's
Do
so
love
like
that movie. I think because it's like it's all over the place and it's like we're just rainbow casting and it's ridiculous and it's silly and we all know it's silly. The whole movie is silly. So
yeah,
nobody like but this was before everybody was trying to do this whole crazy like this is prior to that they did this
right.
movie. It was like, okay, it's just a Cinderella musical. We're just having fun. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's different. Like it wasn't so much I didn't feel like watching that movie back when it came out. Like it was trying to preach to me about equality or
Right.
or like ethnicity or inclusion or anything. It was just a funny, fun musical with all these great actors. And they worked really well together. And I
Yeah.
love that Disney when they did Descendants 4, they actually brought back Brandy. And I do not know the name of the actor, but the actor that played her prince in the Cinderella movie as Cinderella's daughter is in the Descendants 4. And they
I
came
love
back
it.
as her parents. And I was like, oh my gosh. And because
I
I love
haven't seen 4 yet.
I don't think Descendants 4 is a great movie. Like it has some good things about it, but mostly it's throwaway. But that was my favorite part. Like they kind of got me for that. I think it's different when it's done to be fun and when it's done to make a point and
Yeah.
to say something.
Yeah.
Like, are we taking away from the actual art when we keep making commentaries about what's going on in the world? Which is,
So
yeah,
So I thought it was interesting that in the book, it was like really preachy in the beginning about like, oh, the Rusties, our time, they were using all their natural
Rusties.
resources and I was like, okay, bite me hard. Like, what answers do you have, genius? Like, because I hate that. I hate it when people are like, you're destroying the planet. And then I'm like, and what are you going to do about it? They're like, use a paper straw. I don't know. Like,
Doesn't work.
I was getting so irked that it was so preachy. And then she gets out into the smoke and she's like, oh, burning down trees or cutting down trees, bad kids, you eat real rabbits, you know. And
Yeah.
then she was like, oh, right, maybe indoctrination is indoctrination.
When she's in the smokes and she's having to actually work with her own hands for once, like
Hmm.
they're trying to clear all these railway railroad tracks, old railroad tracks aren't being used
Mhm.
anymore, to move into the smokes used for other materials, right?
Yeah.
Which is no, that's good recycling right there. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
you have to
and
get rid of all the tree roots and all the plant and vegetation that is like grown over it. And they're like, oh no, you shouldn't burn it. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't cut down trees or blah blah blah. And he's like, okay, we can try to work around it. And then they start doing it and they're like, wait a second, this is taking way too much time. This is
yeah,
extremely difficult. We could just cut down this one tree. And they're like, and we can plant another one, which
right.
we do. So they're like,
And that was the thing. The thing with the orchids, like how she's like, these orchids are so beautiful, and the hummingbirds, which I'm pretty sure they were describing hummingbirds that would feed off of them.
yeah, it's
And but they were the only ones that feed off of them, and then once like they can't live near them, and so whatever. And so they were burning the fields of these orchids. And um um like the concept that like you're burning these beautiful orchids. Yes, they are. And they're saving the planet. You know what I mean? Like they're
yeah,
actually doing the smart thing, and they're
interesting
planting
correlation.
trees, and they're planting like it was even pretties from the nearby city that were doing the burning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were the ones in the helicopter like torching the flowers
Yeah.
because they were so invasive that they were actually destroying all of the rest of nature. And it was the Smokies that were planting the new trees and clearing out the undergrowth and like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
The concept that like maybe your way is not the only way. You know what I mean?
Can have a balance. Maybe you
Yeah.
can modernize and take care of civilization while still taking care of nature.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to do both.
And there were some aspects of the city that were excellent, like the fact that they had almost eradicated um, illness or ailments
Mm-hmm.
entirely. Like that's great. And I would love it if we came to a point that we could do that. And considering where we were 120 years ago or whatever, we've made
Yeah.
amazing strides in health, and modern technology and whatever has all done that. And and that's great. And we live healthier now. And we're making healthier choices sometimes now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're making more eco-conscious choices. Like that's all great. And the fact that they were doing that in these cities, also great. But their virtue was very easily made into a vice.
Yeah.
And the Smokies were like, yeah, look, we do recycle, reuse, you know, renew, like
Yeah.
we do that within our own capacity without actually they talk about how like everything is disposable in the city, you
Yeah.
know. Oh, my
Mm-hmm.
clothes are dirty, throw them away and get new clothes. Like that's not a thing here. You hold on to your stuff forever, you
Yeah.
know.
Things like handmade and everything matters out in the Smokies because it has more value. It's not
Yeah.
just some synthetic thing that the computer or whatever just made for you.
Yeah.
Like it's a real thing.
In the same way that they like throw their stuff away and items don't really have value to them,
Mm-hmm.
they throw people away too, and
Yeah.
people don't really have value to them.
Yeah.
And I love that. I don't know. I love that kind of commentary.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of the cautionary, like, hey guys, we better take care of the earth because what was it? It was some kind of biological something that got into the oil.
In the book, yeah, in the book, it was like somebody made something that got into the petrol that
Hmm.
was attracted to petrol, and then it like set everything on fire. And then
Yeah,
once it was in the air, it just kind of went into the air, and then found the next
yeah,
thing of petrol, and just kept doing it. I'm like, when they were describing that, I'm like, that would be insane if
yeah,
something like that. That would just destroy everything.
everything. And
Yeah,
so we do need to be careful with what we're doing. You know, we live in Arizona. Everybody has solar panels on their
yeah,
roof.
yeah,
Like we should be doing the things that we can do to, we have a hybrid car. Like that was so funny when we got the hybrid car and Scott was like, absolutely, I don't want to go full electric because I don't feel like I'm ready for, he's like, but I absolutely want hybrid. And for him, it was the mileage.
Hmm.
And then like several people, whenever we would say like, oh yeah, we want to get a hybrid, the next car that we're getting is gonna be, and everybody was like, oh good, oh that's so much better for the environment. And I'm like,
That's not why.
okay, like, and maybe it is like I recycle and that kind of thing. Not
Yeah,
necessarily because I'm like, I have to recycle, I have to save the earth.
I'm
But
pioneer for the planet. Like, no,
yeah, but it
it's not
does a
like
good
that.
thing anyway, so cool, I'll do a good thing. Like,
Yeah, and all these things that they want us to do, it's all fine and good as long as it's practical, as long as you can
right.
put it in a situation where it helps and takes care of people and we can actually do it. I think that there is a way to be too extreme about anything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
all about moderation, all things. If you care too much about the environment to the point you're willing to sacrifice people, you've got problems.
Yeah.
You can find a way between being green and conscious and also being practical and caring about people.
Yeah.
There's a way to do both.
That's exactly it. Like I said, like the concept of turning a virtue into a vice, which I feel like they talk about, they never say it in the book, but they talk about it all the time. They talk about it with um the Rusties were not being good stewards of the earth. But you know what? Neither are the Pretties.
Not really.
Maybe the Smokies are in their small way, but they are not really concerned with that as much as surviving, you know.
Yeah.
They talk about other like frankly, it can be a virtue to take care of yourself, to try to look presentable, like I don't think that it's a bad thing that I put on makeup when I'm going to be recording. Like, you know what I mean? But that virtue of trying to look my best can become the vice of being obsessed with my,
Yeah.
vanity or whatever.
It can turn
Like,
into a monster.
yeah. And they talk about that kind of in every way. Even the concept of like trying to get together because the brain lesions that they like put
Mm-hmm.
on into you when they give you the surgeries, they make you closer to peace. Like they make you more malleable. I don't know what the right term is,
Mm-hmm. It
but
sort of neutralized all your rough edges as a personality, all your free thought, all the things
right,
that gave you individuality. Yes,
right,
when you have individuals and everybody's different, there's more things to like get in fights and arguments about, but
right.
it's also more you can do with that.
Right. They've taken the virtue of let's find common ground and
And
turned it
turn it
into the
into
vice
completely,
of let's just eliminate who you are as an individual and
they're all
make you what
mindless,
I think is right. You
pretty
know what I mean?
supermodels. And like
But
you're pretty, but you're completely worthless.
yeah.
And you don't
So
even know that you're worthless
I
because you lost the ability to think.
yeah, I like that the book very simply and maybe not even necessarily meaning to, but it brings up a lot of these issues that like
Mhm.
I don't think when it was written in the early 2000s that they realized that it would become so controversial what color your skin was because it's always kind of been a thing like it was always a thing, but I
It was in
remember
the background. Like we were trying to not to make it like the
yeah,
other thing we talked about. We were trying to look past it. And then at some
yeah, I
point
remember
we flipped and decided that was more important than everything else. And it was like,
right.
well, now we're making things worse by making it all about
Right.
skin color and
We
sex and
turned the virtue of not discriminating in this direction into the vice of discriminating the other way. We turned the virtue of trying to be more environmentally conscious into the vice of sacrifice humanity for the plants. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like we've gone too far. And I maybe they saw it. Maybe they saw it coming and that's why he wrote it the way he wrote it.
yeah.
But it felt to me like he
Wrote it
maybe
for now.
hinted at a few things, but didn't even realize the kind of conversations that we'd be having 20 years later,
Yeah. Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Like it does kind of make you think of all the things we're dealing with right now. And it's like, that's kind of crazy that sometimes these, that's one thing that's interesting about dystopians is how people can go back and go, hey, in 1984, they say this and this and this, and now we do this. And
Yep.
like, there's all these different things that what's fun about dystopians and these kind of futuristic stories is then actually living to that date and be like, well, sorry, Back to the Future, we do not have flying cars. Still don't have flying cars. But, thanks for putting that idea out there.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it's fun, but sometimes they do kind of predict things that will happen. Sometimes it's totally crazy. But at other times it's like, that's kind of eerie.
Yeah.
So let's talk about comparing the movie and the book. So after having watched it, then read it, there were things that were in the movie that like I hadn't picked up before. So were more interesting, like the whole thing about the spag bowl, spaghetti
Bowl, yeah.
like dehydrated thing. That was funny once I knew about it more. Like it meant more once you read the book. Then it was hilarious. And then there were a lot of little things like that. One of the things I will say is I don't mind at all the ethnicity of any of the characters in this story because he really kind of left them blank. He didn't go into too much detail about how people looked in the book. Even David, he never really talks about his skin. Talks about brown eyes. Both and Paris was supposed to have brown eyes too originally, and that David and his dad looked alike. So like, it's not even it's going against the source material for them to have David be black. And I happen to really like that actor. He's also in Famous in Love, which was a TV show I liked and never got to finish. Jerks. Anyways, but he's a great actor. I thought he's very likable and he has like charismatic personality. So like, I think he's a great David. But I like that. I like having characters be very defined when I write them. But like in this instance, I think it works because of the story. And like, yeah, like he's not going into too much detail about what Tally or Paris actually look like, just that everybody thinks they're ugly.
Right.
So it's not that important. She doesn't start really putting any emphasis into what people look like until she goes to the smokes.
The one thing that drove me crazy is that Tally, like, okay, Paris's nickname is Nose, and they gave him that like ridiculous prosthetic nose.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, that's fake, but that's so that they can take it off and be like, look how handsome he is now, right?
Actually,
And
needs some plastic surgery.
and I thought I thought he was perfect. He was exactly what I saw in my head. The the guy that suspects her, right?
Yeah, I
Like
thought
when I saw him, I'm like, "Yup, you just pulled that right out of my brain and put it on the screen."
exactly.
David, I didn't. I think in my mind I pictured him more like Croy, but I was fine with what he was. Like, I actually kind of liked it that he was so different from Tally.
Yeah.
You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? But the one thing that drove me crazy was that Tally's nickname was Squints, and I don't think she squinted one time in that whole movie.
You're right. She has kind of big eyes for somebody who's called Squint. So this thing, I love the actress. I'm gonna put her name down here because I don't remember it at the moment. Um, and I liked her in all the things I've seen her in. She has a lot of Netflix movies, and I think she's great. I think she works great for this character. But
Yeah.
yeah, like if you're gonna have a character whose nickname is Squint, you got to make that actress squint a lot, or you get an actress that actually has small eyes and has to squint, like some people we're talking to right now ourselves. We're much more squinty than she is. But yeah, they're trying to work with what they have.
Yeah.
So yeah, the
Yeah,
nose was silly, but
I
that's
like it
all
wasn't
we have really big noses. So
it didn't ruin the movie for me or anything, but it just like when I saw Paris for the first time, I'm like, "Hello, big fake nose." Like
yeah,
or when they showed him in profile, when he's like sitting in the audience, they show him in profile and it's like
enjoy.
I'm like, "Wow." And yeah, it drove me crazy that she never squinted. Like I'm like she seems like she's like the rest of the time she's acting this character very well. I'm like, every once in a while, especially if they're going to call her squints, she should be doing
Yeah,
something where
maybe
she narrows her eyes
and so
and then
she
they
squints
call
a
her
lot.
squints and she goes, no, I don't squint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like something. There should have been some, but there just wasn't. And then
Mhm.
Shay, I did not picture Shay like that. However, I loved her. I think she was my favorite actor in the whole thing. Favorite performer of the whole movie.
Yeah, I thought
Es
she was great.
Especially when she went pretty
Yeah.
and she did not act it the way I saw it in my head. However, it almost had that like uncanny valley, like, or Stepford Wives, like,
Hmm.
come on, Tally, like, oh my gosh, it creeped me out. And I'm like, oh, I love it. I didn't even know I wanted that until I saw it. And I'm like, yep.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, the one thing that I thought was a little funny though about that is that her nickname's Skinny, and they didn't really make her any less skinny. I
Yeah.
feel like if you wanted to make the whole point that she was filled out more and she wasn't so scrawny anymore, they could have done something to
Well,
make her
the
look,
whole, the
because she
whole
is really skinny.
time, the whole time, you don't really notice her chest at all. I don't know
Yeah,
if
because
she's large or
they were
small.
wearing like really loose clothes the whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
that's
then,
part of what they were doing. They were trying to make her look like she had more of a figure once she was fixed,
yeah,
hiding her body before. Maybe that was their solution.
the part that I don't even know how to process is um the person that played Dr. Cable.
Hmm.
So either they made quite a statement or it was the biggest self-own in the world. So one thing is that like the whole thing was that they when you're pretty, you're like more like everyone else, right?
Hmm.
Except that they kept having these super ethnically diverse people, which I do think is beautiful. However, it doesn't speak to the story, so that didn't make sense. And then they
Right.
had Dr. Cable being like this like governor or something, this like very public figure,
Hmm.
being like, "Welcome everyone. Soon enough you'll be having your surgery," whatever, like a
Hmm.
big public figure instead of like the secret you, behind the scenes person that Dr. Cable is in the book.
Yeah.
And then they had a transgender black person perform that part. And
I
I'm
didn't
like,
realize she was transgender. Okay.
so
Didn't
I was
realize.
like,
Okay.
what? Like, that was what everyone has like. I IMDb'd because I'd never seen them before.
Hmm.
And there's two pictures that come up, and one looks very male and one looks very female. And there's two different names or two different versions of the name or something. I don't know.
Okay.
So if it was not a transgender person, then there's a lot of confusion out there regarding this
They're twins.
woman.
That's her twin.
But but um but anyway, like I was like, so you had a very diverse person playing the bad guy. Like
Hmm.
either you're saying something, either what you're saying is, hey, pay attention because all of this like obsession with how you look is actually evil, or you yourself were trying to be so diverse that you just totally self-owned and made your diversity pick the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
was like, what in the
That's
world?
interesting. So, especially since if they are transgender, that's definitely sort of like it's kind of that whole being tone deaf kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like what? Well, also I thought it was interesting that the three people that are doctors in this thing are all black. And I'm
yeah,
like, okay, that's not a big deal, except for like I don't know. Again, it seems like are you deliberately trying to? What are you trying to say here? Is this supposed to be like only black people are smart enough to be doctors, or like
right.
is it just so happens you just chose all those characters to be black? Because again, in the book, he doesn't specify race really, and again, because in this kind of world, it wouldn't be like everybody would kind of like so. Like Paris had like more of a Hispanic look. He had a more tan look in the beginning when he was nose.
Mm-hmm.
As he got procedure, he had kind of like a middle ground, medium tan, and then his hair went blonde, and he went blue with his eyes, and like he kind of went into like the middle ground as far as skin tone.
Yeah.
And that was most of the pretties were like that. They were kind of in the middle. They weren't like dark or they weren't really light. And that makes more sense to this notion of trying to equalize everybody. And like, I don't, I didn't mind the actor, the individual who played Cable in the movie. I thought they portrayed the character as far as that kind of stealthy, kind of cold personality,
Yeah.
like very manipulative, very cold. I thought they did a very good job with that aspect of Cable. I had no idea if they are transgender that I was looking at transgender person. So
Yeah, I
no idea.
so I'm trying to look it up now because we had just looked it up quickly as I was trying to get names. I wrote down a bunch of names and I don't remember any of them.
I'll
But
write it down in post. Right
what's
there,
that? Yeah,
bottom, right there.
I can't find it. But
Okay, that's fine.
there was just a lot that like when we were looking up the different names and maybe it's a twin. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? But it was just one of those things where like I was like, "Wait, what am I looking at?" If that's a transgender person, like if it's not, then I'm sorry that I misunderstood or somebody misunderstood. But
Fusion going on somewhere.
yeah, but if that is a transgender person, what are you saying? Making them Dr. Cable. And even if not, and I'm mistaken, or whoever put that out there was just being a troll, or whatever it is, like, you still chose the very diverse person to be the bad guy. You know what
That
I mean? Like,
world is all about being the same and looking the same and anti-individuality. So yeah, I can see what you're saying with that. Like there it is sort of it's an interesting choice.
yeah,
You know, like I feel like everybody else works fine for the most part, and I think they all do a good job. And I don't have anything against that. The person that does Dr. Cable, I feel like they did fine.
did a great job.
And
Yeah,
you are right. Like I did think it was interesting that all the doctor characters are black, and that
yeah,
the three main adult characters who actually interact with are all black. And I was like,
yeah,
what is that for a reason? Is that on purpose, or that just happened that way? Was that just an
yeah,
accident? Yeah, of course. If David's black, he's going to have black parents, right? Or at least
right.
one black parent. So that makes sense, fine. But then again, what was the particular thought process behind the casting of Dr. Cable?
Yeah,
Especially if they are transgender, then it's like, but then again,
right.
that's something that they don't even talk about in the book. They don't talk about sexuality. Not really.
Right. Well,
Uh,
yeah, that was the thing is I wasn't disappointed in any of the acting choice like in any of the actors, you know what I mean? I
mhm.
kind of didn't like that they made well, I didn't like at all that they made Paris into a special agent, special
Yeah.
whatever.
So that was an interesting choice. So one of the things, so there's things the movie does that I think are a lot better in the book, and there's things the book does that are a lot better. And especially if they're going to go on and make any of the sequels, books into movies, they've got to fix that problem. Because so first off, yeah, and so the book starts off with her going to find Paris. He's already been gone a while. He's already pretty,
Hmm.
and we haven't even met him yet. And I get why that would be an interesting beginning to a book, but it works better in a movie, actually seeing them as their former selves, as him as regular Paris, and developing that relationship first, having some kind of like benchmark for who he's supposed to be, what he was supposed to be like, you know, what his energy was. Meeting him for the first time as pretty Paris, it feels like you don't really get to know who he was. You don't see the difference and how changed he is.
Yeah.
You know,
You
like
don't
she's saying that he's changed, but we didn't see it in the book because we never knew him before.
right. And you don't care about him, but you do kind of get the perspective of Shay because Shay never knew him and is just going off of Tally saying, "Oh, he was my best friend," you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked meeting Free Pretty Shay or
Oh,
Paris.
yeah.
Meeting
Yeah. I
Ugly
liked
Paris.
Shay being there kind of in the background, like she noticed Tally, but they weren't necessarily friends yet. So I
Yeah.
kind of liked including her kind of in those scenes. And it's like kind of silly in some ways, that whole ceremony with Dr. Cable being like the spokesperson kind of is. It's very cinematic and it makes sense in a movie.
Yeah.
And like you've got to explain all this stuff without explaining all this stuff. And you've got to
Right.
put it into like a small little package. So it makes sense that they did it like that. So
Yeah.
like special circumstances, like is barely even talked about really in the movie in the same way that it is in the books. But like, yeah, they don't really talk about who leads this whole community, that's this city. They don't talk about
Yeah.
a mayor or like a main person at all.
Yeah, you almost get the feeling that they don't have one. Like
Yeah,
that they're just like, "Hey, look, we all just get along. The pretty committee makes the choices and we all just do our part." You know what I mean?
yeah. So
Like,
it's kind of like leaderless.
yeah.
Yeah, and so that's interesting. But I get why they chose the movie to make Cable kind of like the spokesperson for the city and for everybody. And yes, on the side, she's also got this little side project over here with the special circumstances and all that.
Yeah.
So I get why they did that. And I get why they decided to do that with Paris, where they made it so that, first off, she sent him to go and convince Tally, which isn't the case in the book.
Hmm.
Um, and
Well,
then
he does
also,
go.
but
Her
he
parents
does go see
go.
her, but he wasn't sent by Cable.
Oh, yeah, no.
He came of his own because he was like, she didn't come. He was expecting her to come. She should be pretty
Right.
by then. So that shows like a little bit of like he sort of does still have a little bit of himself in there that he noticed she was not there, and Ashley's like, oh well, I better go see if she's all right. Why isn't she here? So it
Yeah.
says something about his emotional connection
Yeah.
to her that he's still feeling that even with half his brain being like lobotomized.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I liked that when it was his decision because there's still some Paris in there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so even afterwards, when she finds out about all of the whatever's going on with their brains and
illusions.
and she's like, I have to go back and save them. Part of her is saving Paris too. Like, you know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like she knows that there's still enough of Paris in there that he came to Uglyville. Like he never had to look back again. And
yeah. He came back to see her and see what happened.
yeah,
So I like that from the book, but at the same time, I understand why they did it in the movie because one, it gives that actor a bigger role. It makes him more important. I like that they implied in the movie that he had feelings for her of that nature, and then to have him once he's pretty act kind of all cool and different and kind of like, oh, what are you doing here? Like you could see the contrast between who he was before,
mm-hmm,
who he was now. I thought that
mm-hmm,
was very effective. And then also, it makes sense to want to use the actors throughout the story, and then to also make the special scenes a little more like substantial to the story. I like the idea that Dr. Cable takes advantage of Paris's confusion about I'm not sure what I want now because I saw Tally again. I went back there and I was like, I kind of started feeling like I was actually happier there. And I
mm-hmm.
liked that whole scene. I liked, she's like, oh, well, sometimes people need extra procedures. And like, like this with special circumstances and everything. And like, I love that he had no idea what he was walking into. I love that version of Paris a lot better than the book because there is more going on in that. But I do prefer the idea that he went to see her on his own.
Right.
So like, but then it also shows in the movie version, Cable's super manipulative. She's like super trying to control everything. I do like that. It makes her character a lot more like
Yeah.
substantial. But then
Yeah. Well, and I like
become a special though is interesting because at the end, so one, they have him kill David's dad at
mhm,
the smokes. And that's very traumatic for David and for Tally because she just watched her best friend do this horrific thing that he would never do. And it's like now, like if he was different before, now as a special, he's like a robot. And I thought that was interesting too. But like in the book, they showed that like people that were specials, they need to be able to think and make choices. And like they allowed the people that had to do a specific job or needed to have intelligence to have intelligence. They still got the procedure and were pretty, but they didn't get the mind controlling lesions that neutralize people's personalities.
Yeah.
So it was cool in the sense that you got to see the transition from one version of them to this one to this one, but doesn't make sense with the books as far as like the specials weren't idiots. They weren't robots. They were just superhuman versions.
Right.
So, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just what he's like because he started off with the lesions and then they made him special. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. And I liked that Dr. Cable felt evil, but also extremely intelligent. Like, because in the book you can do that with a lot of things. Like I was actually kind of bothered when they used terms like littlies. I'm like, I can see calling kids littles because I do call my kids littles sometimes. But
Like,
in the book they were like,
I never actually said what that was. I'm supposed to just assume what that is. And,
yeah,
you know,
but
put it together. But yeah,
well, like once you start like thinking of all that they have the littlies, the uglies, the pretties, the crumblies, the smokies,
the Rusties,
like what?
the Rusties, the Smokies.
The
That's what
rusties.
they mean.
Yeah. Like they're
Is it
very
because they're all
simplistic.
dummies or
They're
what?
very like they're kind of just that like lower intelligence kind of lifestyle. Like
Yeah,
everything that they do is kind of a lower intelligent, lower expectation kind of thing. And then Dr. Cable, like she's so manipulative and she's so clever and just she just seems like the smartest person in every room because she hasn't been affected the way that the other people have been affected. And in the movie, it's kind of harder to show that. And so she does a great job, I think, of you see that she's evil and you see that she's manipulative, but she's so intelligent. Like she's working it out before people even know there's something to work out. Like, you know, like because you have to. That actor had to put that in their character because you're not reading it. And
explain
they're
it.
not going, now Dr. Cable was extremely intelligent. Like,
Yeah,
you just have to see it. And I did like that like every time you saw her face, she was like, I already have a plan for that. And I already have a contingency plan for that.
I
You
already know
know,
what to say next. Yeah, like yeah,
yeah.
I do like that they made her seem very smart.
Hmm.
But what's interesting about having them, do the whole thing of Paris and he becomes special, then we're introduced to the idea of, the superhuman extra procedure things. And then when she goes out to the smokes or she's on her way there, they have the whole thing in the movie where the guys that were burning the flowers um, were the actual Smokies. So
Right.
I get why they did this. They combined the people. So like one, it gives the Smokies more of a depth as far as like their purpose and what they're doing. It shows that they're trying to help the city too. They're trying to help nature, not just within their own little bubble, but outside of that. Plus, it gets rid of the unnecessary extra characters that we're never going to see again.
Right.
So I like they did that. Plus, it gave her the opportunity to have the whole thing with Shay falling out of the plane, and her helping Shay and jumping into fire to get Shay. That shows her loyalty and her bravery, and that's one of the things that really catches David's attention. This is she's very brave,
Yeah.
and she makes a decision and she does it. Like she's not afraid and she doesn't give up on things. She doesn't stop. And I liked how they portrayed that very well in the movie. Like you could see naturally why he cared about her. And like in the movie, like they implied in the book, there might be something going on between Shay and David. But in the movie, like it's very clear that David does not have those kind of feelings for Shay. And it was never like that. And that Shay hasn't really officially told David how she feels. But you get that as soon as she sees the gloves and she's like, oh, he gave you his gloves. I've been here longer than you. I have the same size hands. I'm all blistery. He did give them to me. Holy crap, he likes you. And
Right.
like, Callie didn't even think about it because it wasn't a thing to her. She didn't realize that that was significant of how he felt about her. And she's like, oh. And then once she knew that was significant, she's like, oh, I think I do like him like that. And she wasn't even thinking about him in that way until she
Right.
realized that he felt that way about her. And then she's like, that he'd made a big gesture. And she started noticing all these things that he's including her in things. He's telling her things that he hasn't told Shay, and Shay's been here longer than her. Like he's gravitating towards her. He's trusting her naturally. And so the whole time she's like, gosh, don't trust me. Don't trust me. I'm a total spy. And like,
Right.
I do love that whole aspect of having to go and be the spy at the same time being like, I want you to trust me. I'm not a bad person, but I am the spy. And being like
Yeah.
that conflict, I thought that was a very interesting thing to have to go through with her. And to be like, but she's also lied and told in the movie that they have a weapon and that
Yes.
they're going to attack the city and that they want to eradicate them and that Shay's in trouble. So besides the fact that they deny her procedure, they also say, hey, your friend might be in real danger. This is a dangerous person. And then so she goes, part of her doing that is to save her friend because she honestly believes that, because this person in the movie universe is a person of authority and like a public figure. She has no reason to think that this person is deceptive or would lie to her. And she's a trusted adult figure. So of course she's like, oh, okay. And she never met
Right.
David. She doesn't know David. All she knows is, he's like a mythical person she's never seen. So of course she's like, okay, fine. Like I don't want to be stuck here forever. I want to get my procedure. And plus now you got me actually worried about my friend. Okay, I guess I'll go do this totally crazy, dangerous thing and go out in the wilderness by myself when I have never lived in the wilderness before.
Right.
Thank goodness I have these supplies and that I didn't die. But yeah, it's actually quite a dangerous thing she does, going by herself into the wilderness as somebody who was raised in a city her whole life.
Yeah.
Knows nothing about nature. And thought that was really interesting. They
Yeah.
kind of squished that down in the movie, which I thought was fine.
Yeah, the montage of her actually going out there. In the book it was great to like because you do kind of want to get that sense of it can't be too easy.
Yeah,
She can't just
not
marry
work for
Sue
it.
through that. She needs to go through hard things, but also like 20 minutes of just Tally in the wilderness would have been too much.
Takes the time. Yeah.
And so I do miss the Spog Bowl thing. I kind of wish they would have had that one scene in there
Uh-huh.
where she's like Spog Bowl, oh okay, and then she's like going to get she's like Spog Bowl, and she like pulls them all out.
Oh,
They're all spaghetti bolognese.
oh. The first like, oh, this is just, oh crap, this is all I have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
It's like,
that
oh,
was you need that comic relief, I think, but yeah, and that speaks to that there are certain elements in the experiences. So we've talked about that before, where like when I'm reading a book, I want you to describe like I don't need 16 pages on walking down the road. I know what a road looks like. Like, is it a forested road or a city road? Got it. Let's move on. However, tell me everything. Like, I want to be there. I want to know. What is the character thinking? Am I supposed to know what the character is thinking? Like, could I glean what they're thinking based upon the things going on around them or their actions? Like, I want all that. When I'm watching a movie, you can show me all of that in a brief montage. You can set the scene and have all the things. And if I don't catch it, that's a me problem. Like,
we had
maybe
time to
you
watch it.
focus in on this one thing. Oh, were you looking? All right, let's move on. Great. You showed me what I needed to know. Like, that's fine. But yeah, so there is that like visual dynamic that does need to be different because you don't want a narrator telling you all the things and you don't want the person constantly having this like internal monologue and you know what I mean, like you want to be shown the story. And so there are certain things like her getting to the smoke that reading is awesome. And I love having the extra characters. It feels more real
Mhm.
reading it to have the crazy guys in the helicopter. What in the world? There are pretties that are working with smoke. I don't get what's happening.
Yeah.
You need that. But then in a movie, no, you don't.
No, yeah, like you
Like,
just kind of blend everything down, and it
yeah.
works fine for the movie, I think. Um, so then the other thing with having Paris, like the whole confrontation with Paris at the end, where him and David get into a fight and he gets thrown over a waterfall, was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I know because I listened to an audiobook too, and the audiobook version I had a sample from the next book.
Oh.
And so I read like the first like maybe 10 pages of the next book in the series. The Pretties is the next one.
Uh-huh.
And she's in Prettyville with Paris and their main and Shay, she's pretty and everything, and their main concern is like what costume to wear for this costume party. And it's like their entire day is all about what are they gonna wear and everything. And like Paris is a big part of her being there. And I'm like, well, how is that? It's I don't know how big a part he is in the rest of the series, but I'm assuming he's a big part if she's going to be pretty in the next she's
Right.
in the next book. And if they make the movies, because if it's successful, which I'm hoping it is, because I did enjoy the first movie, I do like it when movies franchises get to finish their movies, get to have
Me too.
movies of all the movies of all the
Mhm.
books. You know what I mean? Sorry. I do hate it when they just do one book and it's like, why does Twilight get all their books made? But, Immortal Instruments doesn't. Well, they made a TV series, but whatever. I don't like the series. But anyhow, I do hope that they make the sequels into movies. But now they've got a problem. Now Paris is maybe, I guess, falling into the waterfall kind of leaves it up in the air that maybe he survived. But
Right. And as special circumstance, he's like sort of superhuman, so
so like he also special circumstances though, like is he gonna be in regular Prettyville after this? Well,
well, and the way that if it was me, the way that I would fix that is that they all get reset, and so they all forget. Like Shay, especially in the book, Shay is just like, "Of course I forgive you. Oh, that's in the past. I don't even care about that
she
anymore."
remembers it, but she doesn't care. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Not how they made it seem like, oh, that's just childish, like silly things you worry about when you're ugly. And that's
right.
part of how they like explain away why they don't care about these things anymore, why they've changed so much. That
Yeah.
it's an ugly thing.
Oh, my grandma used to always say like she hated it when we would be ugly. And ugly was never how you looked, it was always how you acted.
Yeah.
Ugly was a verb. Is that the right thing I mean to say right there? I don't know. Grammar's not my thing. But like there's a reason that I'm not a good proofreader. But but yeah, she ugly was always how you acted when you were behaving badly. And that's kind of something that they mention like they're like, "Well, I know that pretties are pretty inside and out because that's what it means to be a pretty. Your
Mhm.
outside you is a reflection of your inside you," is literally what they have convinced Shay of,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And it's what Tally thinks, it's what all the uglies think, right? That's why they're like, "You're a pretty? Of course I trust you. You're amazing. You're a pretty." She's been programmed to assume that pretty on the outside equals good on the inside, pretty on the inside. And so like she's like so freaked out when David makes her feel the way pretties make her feel because she's like, that's the effect of being pretty. And she starts to realize, oh, right, that's the
That's just when
effect of being a
somebody
person.
respects you and appreciates you.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Well, that's one thing I will say though. Like, if they wanted to make more of a statement about regular looking people, I do love the actor that played David. However, he is a handsome guy. He is
He is.
symmetrical. He is pretty. So it would have made more sense to have somebody a little more average than this very handsome black man. Like,
Although I like the statement that look at this smoke show living in the smoke as a total normie. You know what I mean? Like, turns out all of these people who are fake pretty like some of them were already beautiful. I happen to think that the girl that played Shay was beautiful in the first place. Like,
Yeah.
you
They put
know,
makeup on her and a fancy dress and a wig.
right. And but yeah, I mean, that's kind of exactly it that like how often do we assume that oh you're pretty now because you've had the surgery so you're wearing makeup like that was kind of the thing I was like so they took a beautiful girl and they gave her hair extensions and put heavy makeup on her they put a tight shirt on so that now you could see her boobs like
Yeah, now they're
pretty you know
figure. And then they had her act different. But I
yeah
think the transition they did in the movie was fine. But yeah,
yeah
she wasn't an ugly person. She just wasn't all glammed up.
right and
Like, really wasn't an ugly person. She's actually rather pretty. But again, she doesn't have like the perfect nose or anything, or the world's highest cheekbones. But there's nothing wrong with her face. She's fine.
right
She's
well
not an ugly girl.
and David kind of speaks to that same concept that like they have been so indoctrinated to assume they are ugly. They are always told that they are ugly. You have not had the surgery, therefore you're ugly. And then she's like, he has not had the surgery, and man, oh man, is he not ugly? You know what I mean?
And that was just I do love that they changed the thing like he's got the family nose so that he's got the family freckles
Hmm.
because like both the dad and after the plays David have those freckles and I was like that was a good cover up so you didn't both have to have the exact same nose but still be like they have a trait that's similar and I thought that worked as far as like the getting going and saving them that was kind of condensed there was a whole big process of getting there in the book which was interesting because I was part of her and David growing closer and they actually become like a couple and like get to know each other and everything whereas in the movie we get like a kiss
Yeah.
like he sort of professes that he likes her but like it's not like a huge moment.
Well, and then they're in the tent together, and so I was watching it at my sister's house, and she was like, "Did they just sleep together?"
They do it.
Like I was like, I don't know. Like they kind
Yeah,
of leave it ambiguous, like
you're like
you choose, but it did seem weird. Like they condensed the time down. It felt like it was only a couple of weeks. The whole story only took place in like a couple of weeks. Or I guess we know that there's a 3 month gap in there. But then all because Paris turns pretty and then she's got
he's years
3 months.
before the surgery. Yeah.
Yeah. What I did like was that, so I liked in the book that, like you said, like they had a whole relationship. He trusted her. When they went back to save everyone, he trusted her. He didn't know about his dad, and he still was in that like I feel like in the book it had gone beyond infatuation. It had gone into something deeper. It was real. And then it gets to the point that he's like they save everybody they save the few of them that they can save. They find
Yeah.
out about his dad. He's like, I believed in you this whole time. Everyone else doubted you and I believed in you. I knew it. I have fallen in love with you and you are the reason that everything went wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
not only does it give her that like this whole time she has been so tortured
Yeah.
because she's living this double life. And now she's like, and I will sacrifice myself to make it right if that's what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool. And also the concept that David is not really sure. He's not really sure. By the end of book one, he's like, I still have, like, my feelings don't just go away, but also, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust you. And I liked that. I liked that there was
Mm-hmm.
that human dynamic. In the movie, what I liked, like right away, like Paris kills dad right there in front of everybody. David knows the truth right there, right away.
And she betrayed
He's
them. Yeah.
already going through, he doesn't trust her, blah, blah, blah. And then he has that moment where Paris is moving toward, they're on the roof. Paris moves towards Tally, and you see David have a flashback of when Paris made that same movement towards his dad
Uh-huh.
and killed him. And he just had that moment of like, you're not taking Tally the way you took my dad.
Yeah. And like, because
That,
like, part of him is like wants vengeance for his dad. So like, I thought it worked really well for
yeah,
that moment.
yeah. Like I liked that and the concept that like clearly this David does feel far more strongly than maybe even he realized for Tally
Yeah.
because he
Even though he
did,
knows she's a traitor, she
yeah,
still doesn't want anything bad to happen to her. Yeah.
right.
So I do think that like her whole, her sacrifice, her decision to become a pretty in the book is a little more impactful because of all the
Hmm.
stuff going on, because all the time that happens in between, and then kind of hiding out and having to deal with pretty Shay, and it's a lot more effective in the book. But like again, I understand why they did things the way they did, as far as like revealing it all at the end. Because
Yeah,
if you're gonna solve all these issues and make it work in a movie, it does make sense to do right there.
yeah.
And it is more impactful to have Paris be the one that kills the dad, to have her order him to kill the dad right there in front of everybody. That is very cinematic and it's very effective. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of things they did in the movie I do like. Showdown, and that was the other thing, that whole big showdown in the Dr. Cable's special surgery room was
Hmm.
like a bit over the top, but again, it was very cinematic. Very
Hmm.
cinematic to have they come in with the helicopter and they have this big rescue scene, which again isn't in the book per se. Like it kind of has that scene, but it's much more low key than it is in the movie. In the movie, they took it to the next level because Paris is there, sort of like her lapdog, little soldier dude. Like when they shoot out the windows and everything, and somehow magically don't kill everybody in the room.
Right.
Um, he does get cut, and so then his like cut that got taken away. That's one thing I like, that they kept that in the movie. I like that they kind of showed them as little kids and like what happened. Why they cut their hands and
Mhm.
made their path to be friends forever, and how she made him promise to keep the thing, and then he got rid of it when he got the procedure, but now he's got it again.
Yeah.
So I thought I liked that. I thought that was very interesting that he had the cut again. So it's like, and he part of him clearly, because he's there, part of him is still there even now. That like
Hmm.
he feels like he needs to follow her. He feels like he needs to go to her. He doesn't know why. He's really struggling because his brain is all over the place. So I thought that was effective and it was interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think my verdict, I think the book is good. I think the movie is good. I think they're both interesting in different ways.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those
Oh,
situations where they're both good.
I also found it an interesting change, and I don't think that I like either one more than the other.
Okay.
The way that they dealt with the orchids. In the book, the orchids were
Yes.
an invasive plant that was destroying, everything. And so it actually was a benefit to nature to burn it. In the movie, they have this very, I feel like it's kind of a heavy-handed like
Explanation.
explanation in the beginning. But the orchids are the new energy source. Yeah, in the movie they make it kind of like wind and solar and whatever else, hydroelectric, whatever, proved insufficient, and so they had to make these orchids that could become the new energy source,
Mm-hmm.
and that the when they are getting burned, it's like to stick it to the cities.
Yeah.
And
They also said that, like in the movie, it was kind of like it's the new energy source, but it's actually killing everything.
yeah,
It's a big lie. That it's not the energy source. It's their fault. Their fault that the world is getting worse.
right. And I thought that was kind of a clever like again in the book when you're reading about it, it's interesting that someone made this hybrid and it got out of control and
Mm-hmm.
you know
It's not like the city's fault that they didn't make it.
yeah,
And like the whole end of the Rusties is kind of just this random thing. It's a cool random thing, the
right,
whole petrol thing. But like again, it doesn't make like one bad guy. Whereas the version in the movie makes the city themselves are the hypocrites. They are the bad guys.
Right.
They're
They are the ones claiming that they're saving the world, and really they're
they're
destroying it.
killing it, and they just want to control it. And
Yeah.
it's about control.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I don't know which message I like better, if there's one that I like more. Because I do kind of like the concept that, like, in the book it kind of feels like, oh, she thought she was doing this, like, good thing, this innocuous good thing,
and then
and turns out that it ultimately had, like, consequences that she couldn't have foreseen or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And I think in some ways the orchid is sort of like similar to the whole pretties, the whole procedure is that it's supposed to make in this hybrid version of what the flower should be to make it, better. You're
Yeah.
making a hybrid version of what people should be to make it better to fix things. But there's unforeseen circumstances. There's side effects. There's issues, things that you didn't see, and now you can't
Right.
take it back. I mean, I do think it's interesting. They're like they can cure the lesions, and like it made. I don't know that it made sense in either the movie or the book how they were going to fix the lesions, but I'm like, okay, fine. I guess it's a cure.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I kind of like that the parents are almost the mom, especially, is kind of the Deus ex machina. She's like, "Oh yeah, I used to be on the pretty committee. I'm a super smart doctor, and you know what? We found these lesions, and I think I know how to cure them. I just need this one thing." And then they're like, "Bam, bam! I have this one thing now, so let's try it out."
finding
And
somebody who's of their right mind to agree to be. I do like that. I do like how they talked about how important that was
yeah,
in the book that they not be just like them and
right,
making people do this against their like without them knowing their knowledge of
yeah,
what they were getting into. And so I respect that. I like how that is in the book.
yeah.
But yeah,
It was just funny that they were like, and solution. I'm like, what the?
yeah, but it is kind of like that in the book, but in like a more drawn out way.
Yeah,
Where in the movie, I was curious when I saw the movie if they killed the dad in the book. I was thinking, are they just doing that just so they can just make it's a strong woman against a strong woman? It's
right.
the two strong female
Doctors.
leaders against each other, or is that what happened in the book? And so I was relieved to find out that in the book the dad does die too. So
Yes.
I'm like, okay, okay. So it wasn't just them trying to make rah rah. We don't need any men. Just it's
Right.
just women. We only need women in this thing, or except for David. Um,
Unfortunately, David needs Dad to die because it's
yeah,
the only thing that pulls him away from Tally. I don't think finding out that she was a spy is enough
yeah,
because of the way that it all happened and the way that she takes off the necklace, and she does it kind of privately in the movie. He thinks that she's like, see this necklace that everybody assumes came from Paris or some other boy.
yeah.
He's not important to me anymore because you are. Like, that's kind of the
Choosing the
message.
smoke. I'm choosing you. Yeah,
Yeah. And he doesn't realize that her message is also, I legitimately chose you. I'm giving up my old life. Like,
I refuse to be their spy anymore. Yeah,
right, yeah.
I do
And
like that
so,
it turned out that destroying it
yeah.
off, and that they didn't tell her if it gets destroyed. So
Well,
that
and
was interesting.
that was one of the things that I saw coming. Like, I figured, I was like, because if it was me, there would have come a point I probably would have smashed it. And I was like, but I wonder if smashing it would have, like, sent an alarm or whatever. And then she puts it in the fire, and then the very next chapter, the title of the chapter is "In Case of Damage," and I was like, there it
There you
is.
go.
She hears a
Yeah,
little she hears a little pop at one point where the mechanism inside explodes, and
mm-hmm.
I'm like, that was it. That was the signal. And so when the very next chapter is "In Case of Damage," I was like, oh, it's going down.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that I like that they kind of address, that is gone from the society in the book, that the parents are kind of vapid almost, like
yeah.
they're like, oh yay, this is what we do. Look, I provided a child for the next generation. La la la. Like
Yeah,
they don't have that like motherly connection, even with the babies, seemingly. Like you don't get much.
yeah, they get like a surface relationship, and she's not realizing that until she starts, seeing the difference between his parents,
Yeah,
like the way they interact, and then she looks at her parents. She's like, my parents don't really get very emotional about stuff. My parents are kind of like nothing's a big deal. That they're very like men. And I'm
yeah,
like, never noticed how weird that was until I saw regular parents, and then until I found out about the lesions, and it's like, huh, I didn't not even know my parents. Like
yeah,
they're not who I think they are because they're not who they're supposed to be, and like that is kind of like mind blowing to think everybody isn't who they really are, and yeah. There's a lot of interesting themes that are in this book, and I think it's really
yeah,
well written and it's interesting. So yeah, when I started reading it, I was like, oh, it's another dystopian, and it's going to have
yep,
the same formula, and it does for the most part. But I do think there's some interesting things to take away from this book that I do find more interesting. And I do like you're saying, that the love triangle is a little more about her and her friend liking the same guy. And the thing is that, yeah, she didn't come there to steal David, but at the same time, David's not interested in Shay. He didn't feel
yeah,
that way about her, and like she might have thought that they were going that direction, but clearly that wasn't his thought. And like
right.
he connected with Tally the second she walked in, and he's never met her before. He has met Shay a few times, and the fact that she chickened out on going before was kind of like made him think she changes her mind too easily, and she's not committed to things,
Yeah.
or
And Shay is seen as the pseudo betrayer because in the past it had always been David. It had always been David that, like, so maybe Shay told her about David, and maybe she says, I'm going to the smoke. I'm going with David. You should go too. Take the flare. If you're not going with me, take the flares. David will come for you. Like, that would have been one thing,
mm-hmm.
but she didn't. She gave her the clues to come on her own, and he was like, "Are you kidding? That's a death sentence." The fact that she survived makes her way more awesome than you because you set your friend up to die
Yeah,
and she
wasn't
didn't.
smart.
And so Shay is kind of behind the eight ball as far as David is concerned. Shay is kind of the one that betrayed the smoke and betrayed Tally in David's mind.
Yeah.
And then ultimately like Tally's going, no, 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 you idiot, it's me.
It's also about me. Like, yeah, and that was probably part of what drew her to the smoke too, is that she would become infatuated with David, and she thought she could go there and they would be together, and that would further solidify her whole need to be in the smoke. But then to have her friend, she was so excited to have Tom, and then he likes her friend.
Yeah,
That's like an extra betrayal on top of finding out that she did actually come there just to spy on you and to ruin everything. But anyways, okay. So overall, movie's good, book's good, interesting.
yeah. I
Okay,
think I like the book more, but I'm not dissatisfied with the movie.
yeah, and I enjoyed the movie, and then I read the book, and I was like, oh, am I gonna hate the movie now? But I was like, I actually still like the movie. So I do see why there are some problems that I gotta fix if they're gonna do sequels, and why some people might not like it. But overall, I thought it was decent. I thought it was
Yeah.
pretty good. So, I like. Anyways, it's that time, and we need to know what we're doing next.
So I've got two things that we're doing.
Okay.
The very next thing that we are doing is we're going to be interviewing the Domps.
Okay.
So they are a husband and wife, Alina and Samuel Dompt.
Okay.
Anyway, so they have co-written Daughter of Water, and there's a second that is on its way out, but the first is releasing. It's in pre-sale right now. So anyway, we'll talk to them. It's really interesting. So side story or full disclosure or whatever. I go to church with his parents and
Okay.
have since 2012. It's kind of weird because for a long time I didn't know them. His dad was our bishop. He and several of, I think him and several of his brothers, like at one point they just showed up to like help with our roof. It was Scott and Scott's disabled father and my disabled father. They were like all dinking around on the roof, and the bishop drove up and he's like, "Why didn't you tell me? I've got a car full of boys to come out." We're like, okay. But so anyway, so this has been like a dozen years of knowing these guys, and I did not know that he and his wife had written this book. And then I have them on Instagram, and they were like, "Hey, our book is releasing. Here's a chance you could win a free copy." And so I entered to win the free copy. But I'm like, also, by the way, I do this podcast.
Yeah. And
So
do
yeah, so
the author spotlight. So cool.
yeah,
Awesome. This is our first one of the season too, right?
it might be the
Yeah,
second.
of the new season. This is our first author
Okay.
interview. So this will be cool. And we've never done a couple before. Husband and wife,
Yeah,
that's cool. Really neat.
yeah. So
What
that's really
genre
interesting.
is their book?
What's that?
What genre is their book?
I believe it's high fantasy.
Okay.
She's like trying to describe it, and she was like, if you like fantasy with a touch of slow burn romance, it's got some found family. Like she like went on and on and on, and I'm like, we'll figure it out.
What are we gonna read next though?
Yes, the next book that I want to do is The Secret Garden.
Ooh.
Another one of those that I just loved as a kid. I don't know, kid, teenager, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another one that has several adaptations, but the one that I really want to
Okay.
focus on is Maggie Smith, the one with Maggie Smith.
That's the one
Um,
I grew up with. But yeah,
yeah,
a lot of remakes of it, a lot of different versions of it.
yeah. I'm gonna watch
Do
as
you want
many
to
as I
just
can
watch the
find.
Maggie Smith one, or do you want us do a couple others, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, so I'm gonna watch as many as I can find. However, because that's what I do. But the one that I want to make sure that we see, if anybody is following along and they want to do this along with us, the 1993 Secret Garden with Maggie Smith, and I've forgotten the name. Of course, I don't write things down, so I've forgotten the names of the main girl and boy right here.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the next one we're doing for our little read along that we do.
For our next read-on. Okay. All right. Sounds good. So keep an ear out for when we announce the author review with our new author friends coming out. The book's Daughter of Water.
Yes.
All right, cool. And then next time we come back from reading a book, we will be talking about Secret Garden. Awesome. Sounds good. Okay, so for Paperback Flicks, I am Ruth Craddock.
I'm Rae Davidson.
And we will see you guys next time.